Hello, scholars. This is 1.7, the United States Constitution. As always, please make sure you take good structured notes on the objectives, and let's begin. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the structure of the Constitution. You need to know what every section of the Constitution contains. The first is the preamble. It begins with the words "we the people," and it lists the purposes of government. We're going to go over each of those in just a moment. Article 1 creates the legislature, the National Congress. It lists the powers of the Congress, the limitations on the powers of Congress, and limitations on the powers of the states. Article 2 creates the presidency, the executive branch, and lists the powers and duties of the presidency. Article 3 creates the national judiciary. Article 4 deals with a couple clauses that need explaining. The first is the full faith and credit clause, and basically all this means is that the state courts from one state have to abide by the rulings of state courts of another state. So, for example, if you are married in Massachusetts and then travel to Kentucky, the state government of Kentucky must recognize that marriage. The concept of privileges and immunities is somewhat related to the concept of full faith and credit. What privileges and immunities refers to is that basically states cannot discriminate against citizens that are from out of state. So it basically protects individual rights as citizen travels from one state to another. It also guarantees the right of interstate travel. Article 5 deals with how to amend the Constitution. We're going to go over that in detail in 1.8. Article 6 deals with a couple things, how to handle debt. The biggest one is actually the concept of national supremacy. It's also known as the Supremacy Clause, and all of you need to know what this is for the assessment on Friday. The Supremacy Clause basically says if there's a conflict between state law and federal law wins. So basically, federal law is supreme over state law. Article 6 also bans religious tests, and then Article 7 is solely about how to approve the Constitution. So an old colleague of mine came up with a mnemonic device or a memory device in order to remember the 7 articles, and because I haven't come up with a better one yet, I'll go ahead and share that one with you. A way to remember the 7 articles is to remember the sentence, "Lucy eats juicy raspberries after she runs." Lucy eats juicy, legislative, executive, judicial, raspberries, relations among the states, and then after she runs, amendment process, supremacy clause, and ratification process. If you have a better one, I would encourage you to use it, but this might be a way to quickly remember what the 7 articles are. So as stated earlier, the purposes of the Constitution are laid out in the preamble word for word, and the preamble begins, "We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America." To form a more perfect union gets to that Enlightenment ideal of crafting the government that best serves and protects natural rights, establish justice. Obviously, the Founding Fathers felt like justice was being denied by the British government and the rights of Englishmen were not being upheld. To ensure domestic tranquility, that refers to peace, right? Domestic peace. Provide for the common defense of the country, promote the general welfare of all of its people, and to secure the blessings of liberty. So let's discuss some of the principles that are embedded in the Constitution. The first one that you need to know is the concept of popular sovereignty. It's arguably the most important one, and that basically means that our government gets its legitimacy to rule from the permission of the people, that the people are ultimately the source of true power in our system. The concept of federalism refers to power sharing between national and state governments. There are some powers that both state governments and national governments have, like the power to tax. There are some powers that are reserved just for the federal government, let's say, for example, making treaties with foreign powers, and then some powers that are reserved just to the states, for example, making marriage laws. The last major principle that I want you to know from the Constitution is the concept of checks and balances. And basically what this means is that each of the 3 branches of government, the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch, each has some kind of power over the other 2 branches. You need to be able to provide an example of some kind of check that every branch has over the other 2. For example, the executive branch can veto laws passed by Congress, so that's a check that the executive has of the legislative. A check that the executive has over the judicial branch would be that it gets to appoint the Supreme Court justices. There are some rights embedded in the Constitution that all of you need to be familiar with. One of those is the concept of habeas corpus. This Latin phrase translates to "you shall produce the body" or "you shall have the body." And basically what it means is that in order for the government to deprive you of liberty, they must publicly charge you with a crime. And the roots of this are to prevent arbitrary abuses of power from kings who, like back in the day, could just simply lock someone up in the dungeon without trial. So this means that you have to be publicly charged with a crime to prevent those abuses of power. Another right embedded in the Constitution is protection against the passage of ex post facto laws, and basically this means that Congress cannot punish people for actions that were legal at the time. For example, the Missouri legislature cannot pass a law that makes it illegal to take American government online and then punish you for doing so because it was not a crime to take American government online when you enrolled. The last right in the Constitution that's protected I want you to be familiar with is the concept of bills of attainder. Congress is not allowed to pass a bill of attainder, which is basically a law that bypasses the judicial system and directly sentences someone to a crime. So just a reminder that you're innocent until proven guilty in our legal system, and that even literal traitors like the Proud Boys are deserving of trials by jury and the basic protections that are enshrined in the Constitution. I hope you took good notes, and if you have questions on anything discussed here today, please bring those questions to class.